For this session, we're going to be looking at Google's product Looker, but overall for our data tool demo sessions, we're really trying to get different examples of data tools that are on the market and ones that people may come across either in the professional or personal data experience, and kind of give an overview of each of them and what they might be used for. So for Looker as a whole, some of its core functionality is in data management and exploration. One of the perks of using Looker is its ability to have interactive dashboards to interact with your data and kind of explore from there, and also create reports from it as well. Another feature of it is data modeling. So behind some of the reporting and dashboards that you can create with it, you can also create complex data models behind what you're looking at. And another aspect of it is that it's business oriented. It's really geared towards what are the different business analytics that people might want to get into as a company and as a professional group. And then the other thing I want to note, I think if Amanda hasn't already posted in the chat, I can post it later too. So we have a GitHub that we post our PowerPoints on, and you'll see links throughout this. But if you want to reference those later, we post those there. So for Looker itself, I'm going to bring up a couple of the different resources for it. The main one is going to be just the main landing page for it. And then another resource that I used to put this together was the documentation that's available for free online for the product itself. Another thing I want to note before we get a little too far into this is that for setting up something like a free trial for Looker, they really go at it from a business standpoint. So it's not necessarily as easy as just submitting a business email and then going through it. They have multiple channels to go through for it. So the first one is after submitting the form for it, you'll be contacted by somebody from Google, and then they'll want to kind of get to know what data you're looking at and kind of what problems you're trying to solve, or different ways that Looker can help you. And then based off of that, there's another initiation with somebody from sales, and then finally getting a free trial from it. So I just wanted to point that out because it's not necessarily as simple as some of the other tools that we've looked at in this group so far, where you can just kind of get that out of the box sandbox environment to play around with for it. So I'm going to bring up the landing page for it just as an example of what to see if you just Googled Looker to begin with. But that whole initiation process for getting a trial kind of starts here. And then also for some of the other resources that we'll be looking at, the documentation and all that as well, kind of comes from this learn aspect of it. Go back to slides. And then the other thing for this, I'm going to have some screenshots throughout this, but I just wanted to go over some of the basics and then some terminology that's used in Looker itself, just for an understanding, because some of the things will come up again. So one thing I wanted to point out for Looker itself is that it operates in database. So I know some of the other data tools on the market, you can open up the program and then have different import options for bringing in data. But for Looker, source data can't be just brought in on its own, in the format of a CSV or a text file or something like that. It's primarily working with databases that are set up and linked within the environment itself. And then another basic part of Looker is that there are different search functions for the data fields that are there. So there's kind of an intuitiveness of working with like exploring the data like as it comes in. Another part of the like basics for Looker for terminology, there are different kind of groupings for like what the data might be referenced as like throughout the documentation. And one of them is dimensions, which is a like customized group within data. And an example of that are like bins that you can define for the data itself. So that's something that might not like natively like come out of the box for like what specific groupings you might want to see for maybe different like categorical or like quantitative data that you have. Another like term that's used kind of often in Looker itself is for measures. So that just refers to calculations that you're using for like the data that you're looking at. So if it's an average, a count, or totals for quantitative data. Another core part of Looker is its language that they created to use like within the tool itself. So Looker ML is what they call the modeling language that's used. And really it was, from like what I went through so far, kind of an alternative to just having like straight SQL for different like aspects of the data that you're looking at, that if you have something that you know it's going to be like reused throughout like your dashboards and your reporting and things like that, that you would have like one kind of core place where you could go in and have that as like what you can edit and kind of go through all the different like workings that are connected back to it. So in this slide, I put from one of the like LookML videos, just an example of what a sample from SQL would look like if you were taking data, if you had like two columns of first and last name of different customer data, and you want to combine them into a full name and uppercase that data. So the SQL, like you can see that the syntax is a little bit different between that and like what you would have with LookML, but I think the kind of like basis behind this was having something that was like a little more, as mentioned, like lightweight for kind of working with your data and getting like what you wanted out of it. And then I did want to mention as well, like for people that might be heavier on like the SQL side from this data tool itself, there's also like a SQL runner in Looker itself. So you can still have like SQL statements working like with your data as well if you didn't want to have necessarily everything as like a LookML statement. And then for some other kind of core pieces of Looker itself, I put in a screenshot from like one of the pieces of documentation for what like a model within a like environment in Looker would be like. So this has, I think it's like aircraft data that they're working with, but just to kind of break down, I guess kind of like the hierarchy of how some of the pieces of it are laid out. An explore, like referred to throughout Looker, is what's going back to a specified set of data fields. So like a collection of, like if you had certain columns and things that you were working with, that would be referred to as an explorer. For a project itself, that is taking multiple LookML files, and like for that, it's taking that and then also queries that might be involved with the data that you have. And then if you do have like any controls within it, if there are like restrictions on what you're working with, those would all kind of fall under this umbrella of being called a project. And then for a model itself, that is going back to like a database connection, and then any explorers that might use that connection as well. So this one is showing like an FAA model and kind of how like that breakdown for an example of an explorer called aircraft would come into that. So that's having like multiple like statements within it to pull certain data that you might be looking at. And then,
Ash,
oh, sorry, Amanda, what's up?
I was just gonna ask, is so are both models and Explorer under projects, or do models exist in and of themselves?
I think I I would have to like look back. I want to say that the projects are coming underneath the models, but I do have it might be I might have it. Oh shoot. It's I think 2 slides down there's like a hierarchy of like how it breaks down. So I think I'll have to reference that.
Okay,
Oh.
cool.
Okay, yeah. Amanda, for
Oh,
this one, okay, so yeah, the project is like the umbrella for like what's there. And then those models that we were looking at is gonna come like as one of like the branches underneath it, and then explorers are underneath that as well. And then any joins are gonna be kind of under that other end. And then for some of the other like aspects of this, one of the like for the example, like this is just with like sales data, so it's just got generic things like product in it. But for what we had talked about before for kind of like how the data is split up for like the dimensions and measures, that would come underneath like this views branch. And then for kind of what's generated from it, like the dashboards and visualizations would be like another thing like off to the side. But kind of I think like working on that backbone though of like the different models and all that like within I guess like the project umbrella.
awesome.
And then for just as in like an overview of different like database connections that are like possible, I think from like what I came across so far, it looks like there's like a lot of integration depending on like where like company data might be housed that you're working with and communicating with. Um, so I just want to list out a couple of those examples here. And one of kind of like the use cases that was listed that I came across was just because it's another Google product for BigQuery. It was saying that like if you wanted to work with like regression or clustering with the data itself, you could use like machine learning models from that, but you could like make the calls for it from like a LookML model. So you wouldn't necessarily have to use like one or the other. It could have that like integration from that end. So for the project elements, since we already went over that, like I said, this is just kind of like an overview of how like that hierarchy is for it. And then for the data itself, I feel like throughout like the different tools that we've looked at, I feel like one of the major things is like, okay, so like once I have my data in, like how am I like communicating with it, like working to customize it in different ways. So I wanted to kind of list out like some of the different customizations that you could come across within Looker. So one of them being table calculations. So um, that could be something where you could have like the security of knowing like someone could look at your data, make a calculation from it, but just in that kind of view stage instead of worrying about somebody like making some kind of finite change to the data. So somebody that's not like natively in Looker all the time could be creating calculations on their own, but having them like I said, like not affect like the integrity of the data, but they could like pull something quick if they needed to, like within an organization that's got like Looker accounts. And then
Right.
another, oh,
So it's kind of like if you have a non-technical audience, they have the capacity to actually see the data, but they're not impacting it in any way. They're not doing wrong calculations, that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, and I think like I'm sure for like certain things, if you knew like, oh, I want to pull this like very specific thing from it, like I'm sure like something like that, like could be set up like otherwise. But if you have like other people trying to just like explore the data like that you've already like put together, then you wouldn't have to worry about like finite changes, I guess, coming to it. But I think from what I saw, like there is still an integration if like something was decided like, oh, this table calculation is something we would want to turn into like something that's integrated in like the models that are there, like that's like an option as well. And then the screenshot that I've got here has like 4 custom fields. Just as an example for measure for some of the like quantitative types. So as mentioned, kind of like max, min, like average, things like that could be something that you might want to generate from the data like once you've loaded it in. And then another thing is just like custom filters. So just another way of kind of like parsing down your data if you didn't necessarily want like everything from what you're working with to be something that you're putting out to an audience. Like for, I think Amanda, you had mentioned it before, I think for like Power BI for like rendering time, like that's like a space like consideration of like what you're working with. And then kind of like the bullet that's underneath that, limiting data displays as well for like dashboard use. Like if you didn't, if you wanted like a certain subset to load, then that would be the way to do it. And then another part for like visualizations that you might want to use within Looker itself. I've listed out like the different kind of categories of like charts, text and tables that you have. This is kind of, I think, with a lot of these tools for kind of creating dashboards, like having like the breadth of different like options for how you're showing the data. And then I think I've got the link up for here, but I brought up just as an example for a box plot, like from their documentation, kind of some of the different things you might bring up with that. The visual that's right here was just an example of like a waterfall graph from what they've given, but I thought, I don't know, kind of like interesting for just like something different than, I don't know, like a standard like line graph that you might be generated. So I think this just has with this one. Okay, so building a box plot chart. So this one, I didn't want to like overload it with screenshots, but for just kind of some of like the different views are for bringing in like the data and then kind of how you can tweak it. For color palettes, I feel like that's kind of like a basic like option that you would have for like customizing the data. Then I think go a little further down. And then kind of just like the base customization of like, okay, like changing like the access names and things like that of the graph. So it's like highly customizable for that, but you can still kind of get that like out of the box like visual that you're looking for from like what's like going to default for what's there, but then being able to tweak it. And then like this one has like an example of if you're setting like limits on like the data that you're showing as well. And I think it for that. And then I put in, this is like another like link that's in one of the slides, but for like the different like types of charts that are there. I think on the next slide I did reference because I feel like a lot of like the things that we've been looking at, I think one of the like options that we talk about is like visualizing like geographic data that you have for in this case for like a lot of the examples it's on like sales data, but for this like kind of how do you tweak geospatial data into something that you can incorporate like into your dashboards. One of the things that was mentioned was integration with BigQuery GIS. And so that was something where depending on what the data has that you're working with, like if you don't have if you have straight points, but you want to do something a little bit different with that, you can go in and make like polygons based on that kind of integration if you want things like split up by like zip code for like a more easy than having like something like this, which has points, depending on like what your data looks like. That could be something that could be more helpful for like sharing like within a company or something, like depending on like what the audience is that you're working with. And then another thing mentioned here for kind of some of the different options for having like heat maps and kind of changing like the look of pretty much like any of the options that are in there. And then for like how to kind of interact with and share like the products that are made within Looker. I think one of the things that kind of stood out to me of like an advantage or something that could be super helpful with it was that you can set for certain dashboards or like whatever part of the data that you're looking at, maybe it's just a single graph or something like that. You can set it to like be sent out or shared across different platforms on like a scheduled basis. So I know one of like the integrations is with Slack. So if you say like, hey, like we want to post this on Slack like every Friday for like, I don't know, like the weekly sales data or something like that. It seemed like kind of a good way to like bridge that gap between people that are working within the tool and then people that want to like glean what like discoveries are found within the data. And then kind of on that note for like usability outside of people working in like directly in it, there are like shareable URLs that can be embedded, like if there's like a company web page or something like that that wants like certain data like posted there, or if it's something like more private, then it doesn't have to be like, you know, posted like publicly, but something that can be easily shared like via email or like whatever the platform is. And then for another like part of it that I thought seemed kind of helpful was that you can set up like alerts based on like the different data points that you have. So if you have like a graph showing like different sales rates, if something is like dipping below or above a certain threshold, you can set up like notifications for when thresholds are met. So that seemed kind of like a nice like option for kind of getting like a little feedback from the data if it's something that, you know, someone's not necessarily looking at like every single second to see if something has gone above or below what's expected. And then for exporting data from Looker itself, the options are to export from a Look or an Explore with the formats that are listed. So I think that's like another kind of like, yeah, well, if I don't want to share exactly like what's there from like a link, you can still have some of these like export options, especially if you have like a specific like LookML like query that's looking for something specific that you need to export for whatever reason on like a regular basis. And I think the one other thing that I wanted to touch on is the Looker API. So setting up pretty much any of the functions that can be carried out in Looker, the API can help set up for running specific things on like mentioned, like if there's like a report schedule or something like that, but also carrying out any of kind of like the administrative tasks with like certain like users. If there's something that would be easier to like automate through that. And then there's like an interactive builder through the API Explorer with Looker to kind of give, rather than kind of pouring through all the documentation at the same time, to give like an interactive way of getting the desired output from the app itself. And then I think so that's all I have for the like just like overview, but I do have a bunch of the like documentation pages brought up if there are like specific questions or if we want to look at like anything specifically within it.
So just as kind of a blanket observation, it seems like it's taking a lot of the capabilities of Python and R and putting them in a GUI as opposed to having to know how to code Python or R,
Yeah. I
especially that point and polygon stuff.
yeah. I think for that, it's like the not necessarily like the drag and drop, but the kind of easy like, okay, I can make my data selection in like 2 seconds instead of like hard coding it. So
Yeah. And those connectors are a big deal too.
just to like give an overview for like the documentation that's like referenced in this, there is kind of like a mix of like videos and like written documents for like the different functions that can be carried out here. And then I think through these quick. But yeah, I think the rest of these were the ones I brought up for visualizations, but
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I have some questions and stuff, but I'll throw it out to the group first. Go ahead. So we've gone over a number of visualization tools and data connectors and stuff. How would you compare this to those?
I think this seemed, at least to me, like, yes, like it was intuitive for some things, but I think for like that kind of integration with like the heavy emphasis on like the look ML part of it, I did think that that part of it makes like it might not be as easy to just like toss at someone in an organization and say like, hey, this is what you're using. Oh, you don't have any background in like SQL. But I think like they still like with that like breakdown of how, let me see, for like it's kind of parsed down SQL for like how you're like building things up. I still think like having that like base like knowledge of like the logic of making different statements and like accessing a database like would be helpful for like this product in particular compared to like for like Power BI or for, I'm trying to think, like I feel like Click was another very like you're in it, it's extremely intuitive, like everything's just there kind of situation. But I don't know. I just
Yeah, it almost seems to me like it's Google's response to like Azure,
mhm.
where there is, there's basic capabilities, but it's very integratable with Google products and not
Yep.
necessarily with other products.
Mhm.
And, it's not trying to out visualize tools like Tableau or Click or Power BI. It's just ensuring that Google customers stay on Google platforms.
Yeah. I think that definitely seems like a part of it.
Yeah, and similarly to Microsoft, they seem to have a penchant for creating their own languages.
Mhm. Yeah. Anyone have any other questions?
And you don't have to stick to Looker. You can ask us questions about anything,
Yeah.
data related, Looker related, Google related.
You know if this is being adopted more by companies? Because I guess I haven't heard as much of it, and that's why I was interested in it. But I'm just curious in general by companies what the usage is.
Um, I have found that it is often adopted by companies and enterprises that are specifically interested in analytics around Google marketing solutions. So Google Analytics, Google Tags, all of the marketing capabilities that are associated to Google. That tends to be where I see this being used more often.
So if someone were going to use like Tableau or Power BI, they wouldn't necessarily go in this direction.
Right, because those are visualization tools in and of themselves and have similar connectors and visualizations capabilities. I don't know too much about the differentiators, but from what I see, the differentiator with Looker is the integration with other Google products.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, if there aren't any other questions or thoughts or anything, just a quick selfish plug. We'll be doing a demo on Dataiku in a couple of weeks, and we also have demos scheduled for Azure Data Factory and DBT. I am planning to schedule, and you will see on our website soon, or not our website, our meetup site soon, demos for generic SQL, Kafka, and Snowflake. So that will be the conclusion of our demo series. So we have about 6 of those left. We hope that you can make them and that you find the products and demos really interesting. If you have suggestions for additional topics you'd like to see, additional demos you'd like to see, anything that's not demos as a suggestion for our next arc, or speakers you'd like to hear from, please feel free to reach out to us. Any of our socials are available. You can also find Ashley and I on LinkedIn. We try to be as responsive as possible. And thank you, everyone. We really appreciate when a good group shows up.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye.